Yama. We are coming to you from the lands of the Darkinjung and Guringai peoples. Hope you enjoy.
Hello, and I'm Sarah Davis. I'm an illustrator and associate art director at Walker Books, and I have the pleasure and the privilege of speaking to the fabulous Dub Leffler today, who is a very prestigious illustrator and author. Dub's written 2 books for young people and illustrated over 25, including the award-winning picture books Once There Was a Boy, Sorry Day with Coral Vass. Once There Was a Boy received international recognition and was acquired by the Library of Congress and has been featured several times in the Bologna Children's Book Fair. Sorry Day, written by Coral Vass and illustrated by Dub, won the Eve Pownell Award for Information Books from the Children's Book Council of Australia. Black Cockatoo, which you illustrated, Dub, was also an honour book that year, I think. And then most recently, the highly lauded Bindi, which has just been an absolute runaway success, and rightly so, because it is the most beautiful book. That was the winner in the Australian Book Industry Awards Small Publishers Children's Book of the Year, and won the Queensland Literary Awards for children's book in the children's book category. Shortlisted for the Adelaide Festival Awards for Literature, the Ian Enola Award and the Ebby Awards, shortlisted for the Children's Book Council of Australia Book of the Year Awards, which it actually won, and has just gotten from strength to strength, and also won the sorry, Dub, I probably missed something. It's just such a long list. I think if you name a children's book award, Bindi's been recognised in it. So yeah, so and your latest work in progress and next cab off the rank is the very beautiful Our Dreaming, which is another collaboration with Keely Saunders, who is the author of Bindi, who you've collaborated with quite closely now. So yeah, you've actually got a very interesting, I mean, you're a fine artist, you've ended up working in children's books as your sort of preferred medium, and it might be interesting to start to take us way back when on a little bit of time travel, because I think you've got a very interesting origin myth about how you stumbled into the world of children's books. I think involving strange psychic forces and weird coincidences. And, yeah, so tell us how that all came about, that serendipity.
Yes, written in the stars.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like we probably talked about this on that fateful car ride back.
I think we
did. Yeah. It's. I mean, it's. Yeah, it's really. It's a crazy. Yeah, it was a crazy start to the story. I was 25 and was living in Queensland. I had met my biological family for the first time, and so we're hanging out and getting to know each other. And then I just had this, and I was, because I have 2 mums, my mum that adopted me, and she unbeknownst to me, we talk all the time, and unbeknownst to me, she'd gone to a psychic, and the psychic said, you have a son, and your son is going to make books, and he's going to do really well, and and he is going to travel, as in overseas. And I had no idea of this until I told her about a fateful meeting I had after moving back to Sydney. So I just had the inkling, and I said to the mob, I said, I've got to go back to Sydney. And they're like, why? I said, well, I'm going to do children's books. I remember saying that I had no idea. And up until that point, I'd worked in the arts as an animator and background artist and cartoons and murals and teaching and whatnot. And so I moved back to Sydney. I had $200 guitar and a bag.
This is sounding very much like a Bob Dylan song.
Cue the music, the flashback. So imagine young Dub with brown hair. Yeah, and one of the first places I went to was Koori Radio in Marrickville on the day that I went back to Sydney, and I walked in, and stuck on the wall, actually, I mightn't have mentioned this to you before, but stuck on the wall was a portrait I'd done that somebody had photocopied unbeknownst to me, and they'd stuck up there was a few of my portraits they stuck up in one of the studios there in the old American hospital. And I went, that's a really cool sign. And then I saw a mate of mine, and he's like, Dubs, what are you doing? I haven't seen you for ages. I said, I just moved back to town. And I said, I'm looking for a place to stay. And he said, well, I'm looking for a flatmate. And so I gave him the $200, moved in that night, and over dinner, we're having a feed, and he just, casually said, oh, you're an artist, Dubs? And I said, yeah. He said, and he was an artist himself. His name was Jay. Paintings all over the place. He said, well, there's a lady coming to the house tomorrow, and she does children's books. So literally came to my doorstep. And so that was for a little company called Indage Readers. And I ended up doing 6 books for them. And, I was really nurtured actually by her name was Margaret Cossey. And she, like my ethos is, if you ask me for a lettuce, I'll give you a whole garden of vegetables. I'll give you more than what's asked of me. Not to the detriment of myself being cheap, but, I want to impress people and also want to give them more. So the only option, the only answer they can say is yes, we'll have more from you. And so I tried, like I just did as much as I could for them and anybody that couldn't illustrate a book. And there were a few artists that they struggled with illustration because it is a different art. And so I would just put my hand up and say, yes, I will do that book. And so I ended up doing 6 for them. And
so would you say that was kind of an apprenticeship as well as a mentorship?
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of it I was doing, like I had no studio, and within that 6 years I was still traveling. So I was still doing odd jobs, and it was, during that traveling that, I rang my mum, my adoptive mum, and she's, what are you up to? Because I was just traveling around and being a bit of a vagabond. And I said, well, I've started doing these kids' books. And she said, oh, years ago, I went to a psychic. I just went, what?
And then the whole story came out.
I said, but I haven't gone overseas, So we just laughed, and then.
But interestingly enough, it has been your work that has taken you overseas, hasn't it? I mean, you've had some incredible opportunities through your books and been to some, being part of some incredible events globally. So do you want to just give us a little overview of the sort of experiences that have come out of this bizarre set of coincidences for you and how it's expanded?
Yeah, I think we touched on this when we were catching up the other day.
Yeah.
And it's like you never know who's going to read your book. You don't know. And sometimes it's like, you can be done with a book. You can just like, that's it. I just have to shed this book. I have to go, and after working on it for so long, and it can be just sort of like sometimes it's almost meaningless, you know, you sort of, you disregard the book, or you leave it behind, and then someone will read it, you know, so you don't know, and then you just end up in these amazing, amazing places, you know, for it, like, God, this will be a bit of name dropping. I don't.
That's all right. You're allowed.
I don't like,
Perfect
you know,
word for it.
sometimes I'm like, you know, I mean, because then you know, you start fanboying out, and I remember getting an invite after once there was a boy was out, and that story really changed my life, and it just, that really launched my career. And I had been, I'd already had 6 books. I think I had a few others in the works. But anyway, I get an email from Warwick Thornton's wife, the filmmaker, Beck Cole, who is also an amazing filmmaker. And she said, Dub, we would like to invite you out to this really cool retreat. It's really hush-hush, and it was with Screen Australia, and I'm remembering now. And I just was like, really? Why me? Why? And she said, well, our son saw your book in Alice Springs Library and brought it back home. And we're like, we've never heard of this guy. Let's get this guy out with this group. And they said, there's going to be a group of authors out there. And I was just like, oh, wow. So, and it was, you know, it was this exclusive workshop out at Uluru. And they said, we don't know, but there may be a special international guest. And I was like, what, really? This is cool. And so you went out there, and I had no idea of, you know, the company that I was keeping until sort of afterwards. So, you know, you get to the airport, and here's Bruce Pascoe, and then there's Melissa Lukashenko and Kim Scott and Tony and Birch. And we're just going, I'm just going, no, I'm in the wrong, no, what am I doing? And we all go out and get this, you know, amazing, we go and we meet Warwick Thornton and what's her name? Charlie Perkins' daughter, Rachel Perkins, was out there, and you know, so we're talking. It was all about writing for film, and the special guest. Oh my God! Special guest is this guy called Yamo Arriaga, who wrote the film Babel and 21 Grams, and just like, oh God.
That must have been so inspiring, especially at that point in your career.
And, you know, and that really hit home. Like, if it wasn't for their son going to the library and getting my book, and, you know, now I've got, you know, great friendships with those people, and they're just, you know, that sort of, those things like that, you just don't know. And it's really important to keep in mind where your work may end up. Like, it may just be, you know, it may end up in the bargain bin, but you don't know who goes through bargain bins. You know, everybody goes through bargain bins, and it's, like those things, like, they can change your life. It's amazing.
Astonishing. And it's also taken you around the world, hasn't it, to Indonesia and America. And do you want to tell us a little bit about the exhibition that you were involved in America? Because that was quite spectacular. It's
a really, really cool story. So I think it was in the 40s, I think 1940s. There were two guys from the States, Ed Rue and John Kluge, and they've formed this gallery over there called the Kluge-Ruhe Aboriginal Art Collection. And so they're like I think it's the only art collection specialising in Aboriginal art, and it's in Virginia. It's just outside of Charlottesville that had the rights.
Wow.
And yeah, we got to go. There was a group of us. We did a bit of a world tour, and I was with actually Uncle Bruce Pascoe, and we had travelled through Edinburgh and Ireland, and then met up with a few of the big guns in an Aboriginal delegation in America. And one of the places that we got to visit, and like Jared Thomas was in that crew, just amazing. And so we're driving down Highway 66, going to Virginia, and then you come to this, it's all beautiful farmland, and it's just like in the movies, and then you come, there's the rolling hills, and you just see these classic American farmhouses, and we rolled into this big, round, beautiful gravel driveway, and there's this massive Aboriginal flag hanging off the barn. And you go, where are we? And we go in, and it is this old farmhouse, and it was apparently the land was owned by Jefferson back in the day or something. And so they house all these like amazing artworks there, and so we forged a relationship, great friendship with the staff there, and they sent me, Margot, the CEO, she sent me a beautiful handwritten letter saying that we'd love your work and that we would really like to, do an exhibition with you. Like, it's just, yeah. And so actually this, you can see the painting behind me.
I've been looking at it this whole time.
On there, yeah. That was actually over there, and a lot of my so it was like the very first online residency, and I'll have residencies for Aboriginal artists for a month. So if it wasn't for the pandemic, I would have been over there, and we've got plans to actually to actually make it happen in person one day. And it's because they're all supported by the University of Virginia, and so I have to thank them. And just so a lot of people got to see my work, and I think it's still it's their very first virtual exhibition, so amazing.
Yeah, that's an incredible opportunity, and like you say, a real meeting of worlds too, with the Aboriginal flag on the other side of the globe, and meeting people from all these other diverse backgrounds, and seeing their visual voices and their work, and that's phenomenal. And you obviously, I mean, the sort of work that you've done in the residency there, which is those beautiful, they're acrylics, aren't they? Or are they oils? Oh
yeah, this is mixed media actually.
Yeah.
Long time.
And that's an incredible departure from your early, like your first books were quite commercial and quite sort of cartoony, weren't they? And I think your background was in animation to begin with, isn't that where you started, or you did some animation work?
Yeah.
And then you've come out of that and through a few different incarnations, I think, of sort of experimenting with different styles to arrive where you are now. And it's been, it's quite astonishing how many different voices you're capable of working in, and sort of how many different strings you've got to your bow stylistically. So I thought it might be interesting to sort of look at Once There Was a Boy as your first book that you wrote and illustrated, and sort of look at that as a little bit of a case study. In this series of interviews, I'm just trying to get a little thread of commonality that runs through all of them, and asking each person to focus on a book and talking about the process of developing it, so you can see how different people work. So maybe we could talk about Once There Was a Boy, and just how that came about, and how you, because that was your first stepping off point from working in that more kind of commercial area, wasn't it, and finding a more lyrical, sort of painterly, experimental way in which to tell your stories visually, and really looking at that interplay between text and image, and crafting the whole narrative yourself. So yeah, how did that start? Like, what was the little flashpoint that kicked that one off?
Yeah, well, I was talking to a great friend, publisher at Scholastic, about this the other day. Is that, you know, this part of that book, I mean, you know, I owe to Robert Inkpen because of Storm Boy. And it took me a long time to sort of go, oh, right, you know, there's a boy on the beach and there's a pelican boat. And it took me actually revisiting his work and actually, you know, meeting him to sort of, oh, right, you know, that's a sort of, it was a you know, like an unconscious thing. And the real impetus of that story was I would tell it at the end. I was writing at the time, and I was doing a lot of workshops just based on my illustrations with in libraries, and I had just started doing schools at that point. And so at the end, and I would often run out of content in the lesson, so I would say to the kids, would you like to hear a story that's never been told? And so, yes, you know. And so I would, and at that point, it was only, the ending hadn't been written. But I got up to a certain point and I'd say, well, what happens next? You know, then I would end the workshop. Oh, and you know, I owe kids royalties because they would just spew out these, oh, what if this happened, you know? And it was such a, you know, that really helped, you know, like part of that, the voice of that book is the voice of children.
Mm.
And so I went through like a whole, you know, a few changes. There were like whole arms that had to be cut out of the book, and the whole process. Actually, I sent it away. It's daunting when, you know, you're an illustrator and you're not known for writing, and then you write, and so you know that you know the judgment that will come, which is good because you are in the industry, and but I also knew from an animation background of how to frame the story visually.
It is very cinematic, the sort of angles and compositions and the scope of illustrations. Then when you zoom into sort of little intimate details, you really do get a sense of that through the book.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, I think, you know, because I like to use, you know, sort of work in like night moves, as in on a chessboard. So one move means three possibilities, that sort of thing. And so, you know, I really, like within the design of that book, I also, as I was illustrating it, I was also making a short film, and I was writing music for it, so I could promote the book after I knew I had a contract. And that this is the whole, you know, I'm going to give you a whole garden of vegetables. And, you know, because I really wanted, you know, I mean, I just wanted to do my best and, you know, get that, just be able to touch people with that story. And I mean, it was rejected by 2 publishers.
And then who did it find a home with in the end? And
then, yeah, and then it's, you know, and then 6 months later, I get a call from my really good friend, Margaret Wiskin, who used to be the publisher at Mugabala Books, and just said, we love your story. And it was just like, oh, I was walking the street in Ashfield or something, you know, I'd done the shopping, and I was like with this phone, and she's like, I love your story. And I'm like, I don't want to get run over crossing this road with all this. And I think my bag broke or something. And I was picking up stuff and just really like, and just, you know, you just, yeah, like at that point I had forgotten. I just thought, well, no one's going to, you know.
And so at that point when she phoned you, how far was the book through its development process? Like, would you say it was finished, or was there still work to be done? Or
yeah, like there was some editing that needed to be done, and that was quite quick actually. We sort of, yeah, and it was because I was open to the process, and like I just really trusted them, and they just did an amazing job. And you know,
that can be hard if you've kind of held on to this sort of creation for so long, and sort of, you know, you get quite attached to it in its current form, and then having to hand it over is a real trust fall, isn't it? So
yeah, it's your baby, you know,
yeah,
and
so,
and you don't want it to be.
yeah, so having that relationship and that trust with the publisher is it's a very collaborative process, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, like because I had, you know, it's a blind faith really, and I had, I mean, yeah, a publisher that won't be named had said, "Oh, we've done an edit on your story," and they gave me some feedback, but they just rewrote the ending. And I was, what are you doing? Like this, like 1/3 of the book, they just totally rewrote. And then it was a good lesson for me to, you know, whoever, if someone publishes this, as long as they keep the voice there,
And maintain the
you know,
integrity.
yeah, like you can edit all day, but as long as that kernel is there, and you know, and yeah, Magabala they were just fantastic with that. They, yeah, they were so helpful with that whole process. And so at that point, like I was ready to go. Like I had just done all these sketches, and the very kernel of the story just started with a sketch that I did. It was a charcoal sketch of this little hut on a beach, and there was that's all you could see, this little hut, and there was jungle behind the hut. And I would look at it and just go, who lives in the hut? And then I would just start creating this world, and that's where Once There Was a Boy came from. And
actually, I've heard you speak before about this concept of the king image in every book that you work on, like the image that either sparks the rest of the story or unlocks it for you so that you can take it in the direction that it's wanting to go in, which is a really lovely concept. And I mean, it sounds like you have that experience in almost every single book that you've worked on, where you have one iconic image that kind of cracks it for you. So yeah, talk more about that. I think it's fascinating.
yeah, it's, you know, I mean, I actually got it. Yeah, that concept actually comes from music. There was one of my favorite musos. He talked about this amazing guitarist, and he just talked about. He said, you know, the whole thread of this piece of music, it depends on these king notes. So the whole thing just revolves around those king notes. And I was just, I have to, you know, you can apply that to illustration, where like we have our concept sketches, you know, and there's always like the one that will lead on to others and just will explode. You know, that's the big bang moment. And they, you know, it defines how the book will look. And so, yeah, like every book that I've done, I'll do concepts first, and you know, you hand in your storyboards. I'm actually doing it at the moment with a book for Hachette, and called The Beautiful Night. And it's, you know, I'm right at that process where waiting for the explosion, you know, and it's sort of just like you're feeding this little fire just with tiny little sketches, and some of them are terrible, but you have to do that. You have to do all that process and
keep blowing on those embers.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then when the fire starts, you just have to feed it. You just got to keep putting wood on, and it's sometimes I'll come with an amazing concept and I'll spend a lot of time with it, and then it's almost like you kick yourself and go, oh damn it, like the publisher will really like it. Oh, is the whole book going to be? Oh, I guess it's going to be exactly like that, And so you raise the bar for yourself. It's like, damn it. But at the same time, you're like, well, it's good. You're going to rise to the challenge. We'll keep, because you hopefully want to, at the very least, you want your work to be consistent. But,
that's right. And it sounds like you're always challenging yourself to just go further and push yourself harder, see what you can do next. And I mean, you can see that through the way your style's evolved. You got to
grow.
Yeah, absolutely. But I wonder if, like, the metaphor that you just came up with there of the spark and the embers, I mean, that might be a really good jumping off point. I was really interested to discuss symbolism in your work and how, because a lot of the storytelling you do, as well as being an author who crafts narratives with language, and you're incredibly articulate with images, obviously, and your work has this beautiful sort of resonance where you sort of place objects and creatures and people and scenes and kind of present them in a way so that they have this sort of wider significance and are telling multiple stories at once. It's not just what you see on the page. It's you've got this whole sort of resonance beyond that of conveying important ideas. And Bindi, for instance, with the fire, I know the bushfire plays a large part in Curly's narrative there. That's sort of the crisis of the whole book, and you've used that in your images too. And sort of picked up on that and run with it in really beautiful, nuanced ways. So yeah, maybe you could talk a little bit about how you like the sorts of thought processes you go through when you're trying to get that sort of deeper resonance to your visual work, and how it plays into the story that you're illustrating or writing yourself. Those sort of symbolic references and that sort of language that you have.
Yeah, I go back to, like the work of Robert Ingpen, where he would illustrate outside the text, but he would still be in the same world. And just by putting those little, it's almost like putting this visual border, or he's like painting the edges of an island where the story is situated. And it really helps you explore that. And when I learned that lesson when and applied it to Bindi, and this is after Sorry Day. And I like, I teach this to aspiring illustrators, is that, it's our job to support the story. We can't step on the story though. We have to, we can push the story along, okay, but don't hold it back. We just have to keep it moving. It's like it's on a river, really, and we can just help guide it, okay? So, and we've got to keep it afloat and make sure that the story doesn't drown in our own work, and we can't be too self-important. That's at that point, saying that we've got to keep it afloat, and we have to, we've got to keep lifting the story and make it, bigger, and help, because our role is to help the story. And like in Sorry Day, I used it. There was it's where the men are looking for the children and they're hiding.
That was a picture I wanted to discuss because it's really beautiful.
Yeah,
it says so much in such a simple
way. And then that was sort of, you know, that whole sort of, you want the men to dominate the landscape, but also you don't want to show what the men look like because the reader will bring that in their imagination. So it becomes, you know, part of their story. The reader adds to the story, and that's what you want. And we just remember like going, how can I show something that hasn't been written, but I don't take away from the story? And, you know, so you sit there for a long time. And I often, if I'm drawing stuff that's, you know, concerned with a bush or it doesn't matter what I'm illustrating, I will put on a soundtrack that echoes that. Whether if I'm drawing a cafe, I'll just put on like a cafe vlog.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, so I've just got the sound and it really helps, you know, so
really immersive.
Yeah, and so I would just have, you know, lots of stories about Stolen Generation playing, and this you know, the speech from Kevin Rudd, and then I would just have bird sounds when it was out bush, and I just remember just hearing this bird, and I was like, that's the, you know, and that bird sort of becomes a narrator in the sense. And when I just put it in the story, and then I can show a man's looking at it, and just there'll be a really silent story there where that's how they find the kids. And so because you can take that further, and you know, doing that in Bindi, we're just painting that, you know, like painting it because it's, you know, the setting is you know, bushfires are around, and so I've drawn it all in charcoal and charcoal pencil, and made sure it's really gritty, and you've got that grainy sort of, you know, and I haven't been to, like, they're almost crumbly, those illustrations, and it's a bit like the, you know, what the land is at that moment, and you know, just being able to go, oh, like pick certain things in the text and then sort of pushing them a bit further, whether it's a food or just having a plant there that you don't mention, but you know that it's sort of,
just enriches the world.
Yeah, it'll be in your imagination. And so it's just sort of, yeah, it's almost like being able to know what other people will imagine. And
I think that example that you mentioned from Sorry Day, of just being inspired by that soundtrack you had on and hearing that one bird and using that to make the leap of, you know, making that logical link in the visual narrative that isn't present in Coral's text. Like it's never actually, you know, spelled out how the children are found. It's just, you know, they are found, and it's up to you as the illustrator to sort of, like you're saying, fill in those gaps in a way that complements and enhances the story, and make those sort of like the visual narrative gives a sort of underpinning logic to the text and the resonance of the text. And I thought was really clever, like when you were saying that you were sitting there listening to stories from people who are part of the Stolen Generation. I was thinking, well, how do you protect yourself in that process? Because, you know, obviously that's quite an emotional roller coaster, and especially if you're doing it because you're in a creative space and you're trying to open yourself to it.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's something that you've had to consider when you're illustrating stories like that as well, because you're creating books for very young children about quite difficult, upsetting topics, about, you know, things that genuinely happen to children, you know, and there's that kind of emotional danger there, and you, I know, feel a responsibility to kind of do it in a very sort of scaffolded way for them. And I noticed there was one image that I'd really love you to talk about in Sorry Day, which is the the image after the children are found with the footprints in the mud and the cattails. I thought that was a beautiful way of, you know, taking a moment that could be incredibly traumatic and sort of not losing any of the emotional impact of it, but presenting it in a way that was, not traumatic.
Yeah, we we had discussions. I had discussions with the National Library that published it, and Susan Hall, the publisher, the then publisher, because I had almost finished the original, and the original image for that was, you could actually see, because and I was reflecting the text quite literally. They were chasing the children in the mud, and so there's the children are running towards the viewer in this illustration I had done, and screaming, and there was and so you could see, and I'd scattered all this I painted all this coffee on the page as mud, and you sort of see this much of the man down, and he's reaching out, and he's almost, and you could see in the background the other man was chasing another little kid, along the riverbank, and they're off in the distance. And yeah, it was, I was just like, and it was really powerful image. And I remember, because I would cry when I was illustrating that book, and and just using the process of research, and sort of bring up stuff for me, and I was just like, it's a fine line, you don't want to discredit the story, and you don't want to take away from the seriousness, but you also want to have people to keep watching, keep reading. And so I just I was like, what can I do without showing them, and just going back to tracking, and I was like, that's so you're operating on a different level there, and we can see that there was, and so you part of you is like you're illustrating like a clock, so you're dictating what time something happened in that regard. And I just so I just was like, well, let's just show them we'll show the story but without showing any people. And because there were 5 kids in that part of the story, so I just had the 5 cattails, the bulrushes there. And so they became the kids, and so they became trampled and broken and
lying in the mud.
Yeah, and there's and the scattered seeds too. So they became the characters, and just having those, the men's feet where they hadn't struggled at all, and you could just sort of see the
really dominant boot print.
Yeah, and we had it was great that actually happened, because it was it's a far superior image, and it's actually had this, it brought this silent ominence, that moment really needed.
And I think it also really highlighted the sense of powerlessness in that situation, that it was done. You had the remnants of it. There was no going back. It couldn't be undone. Which kind of underpinned the whole apology as well.
Yeah. So they've like, that mark has been made, and all we can do is witness it, really.
And we talk about illustrating like a clock, and we started off talking like about symbolism in your work. And I remember you saying something about Bindi and the silky oak tree through Bindi, and how you use that as a sort of timekeeper, and it's part of Curly's story as well. But you had some, in terms of like your working methods and how you actually go about gathering material for these ideas, that was quite a fascinating approach, I thought, how you handled that.
Yeah, I sometimes, I like to collect objects, and And then sometimes I actually, and this is something that, you know, I picked up from you actually, you know, like making little dioramas and,
Oh, yeah.
you know, and so, you know, I did it for Our Dream, and it's coming out. And with Bindi, because it's, you know, there was it's broken into 3 parts. What is it? This is Smoke and Cinders and Sprouts. And because we've luckily, at my old property, there was a silky oak down the back, and so we get black cockatoos there. And I just was like, well, just, you know, I can use this because there is a you know, time that happens in Bindi. And I was just like, I'll just use the twig as a clock. So, and I can just use it to help underpin those headings. And so I just got this, you know, little branch, and I had stuck it in some sand. And then I just I took a few photos, and you know, then I burnt it, and I was taking photos and just watching that change, which just became, you know, like that's my favorite image from that book is where you just see the smoke, you know, and it's so it's still, even though it's in black and white, there's
Smell it.
yeah, and it's got that, it's like you're, you know, yeah, you're recording like a moment of death, you know, where it's that really fine line where there's still life, and there's life in the smoke, as well as the death, you know, the death of that tree, which that became like a symbol in itself. And it's just those tiny little things that you can show that means, you know, they mean so much. They can mean so much in a story.
And by doing that, you're obviously leaving a lot of space for the reader to be part of the process. You know, a lot of the emotional impact of what you were doing and the important ideas lie in what you leave unsaid. You know, you've got a very, very subtle touch with that. So you're expecting the reader to bring part of the equation. And like, how do you hope readers will interact with your work?
Yeah, well, I mean, you've got to give them credit, I think. And, you know, with storytelling in general, you know, tell us what we don't know. Just those other little things that, like we all know bushfires, you know, even in the city, we know bushfires. And it's just sort of, you know, everybody looks at the big thing, like all this land was burnt, or but it's those little images, you know, like the koala coming out drinking water, which they don't do, you know, normally. Things like that, they really stick with you, and that's, I think, you know, that's what the average person, they do notice those things.
So you're working on another book with Curly at the moment, which is in the works with Scholastic. Called Our Dreaming, which I've been privileged enough to have a sneak peek of, although which I'm very pleased about, and it's absolutely exquisite. And you know, would you like to just sort of talk us through the process of creating that, and how you've built that world? You've got some interesting characters in there.
Yeah, that was, you know, like what we've talked about, you know, talking about before, about, you know, illustrating the story that isn't written, but it's the same story. And you know, yeah, it's special in that way, because I can say, you know, there's echidnas in it, and you know, the first image will be shared this week. Actually, I'm sharing sections of it, and but there's no mention of echidnas in the story. And it's like, so it was so, you know, it's liberating for, you know, like Curly and our fantastic publisher Rebecca Young, to just to be on board with that and to support that. You know, like it became twice the story.
Are you allowed to give us a brief overview to begin with of sort of what it's about and sort of the...
It's, well, I mean, it's...
the nature.
Kelly has done such an amazing thing where, you know, she's encapsulated the world, and not, you know, like the unseen world in a sense. It's like it's not a religious book. It's a spiritual book, and it's you know, it's like there's the magic of this country in it. And it was actually when I first read it, I actually you know, I thought, whoa, this is like, it was such a big concept book to and I was, you know, I doubted myself a little bit. And how can you do, you know, how can you illustrate such like, it's a big concept book.
So you had to find a way in.
Yeah, and it took me a long time, as I'm sure that, you know, yeah.
Did this one sort of begin with a king image as well? Did you find?
Well, yeah, yes, it did, which wasn't an echidna at all, but it was another animal, and that was yeah. I just I'll have to share that image. Was a koala, and it was looking out, and it was up a tree, and the tree was had been carved with a dendroglyph. And that was the whole, I just went, that's what the whole book has to be a reflection of, there's a reflection of Aboriginal culture without pointing to any single mob, but it's also so worldly, and you know, it's a connection of like the spirit of country in there, of all countries of the world in there. That people would be able to relate to, whether it's just watching an ant go about its business, or you know, a flock of birds.
It's the human connection with creation.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, it's, and that image, and this is sort of, I'm a big believer in pressure makes diamonds. And so, you know, we had stuff with it was at plan, a lot of concepts. I did so much work, a lot of pre-viz work for it, and then, you know, some images would just come really late in the process, and yeah, Beckett Scholastic would just, yeah, that's great, that's a great idea, that's, you know, so there was an amazing amount of trust there. And so that was sort of that hot, just from that one image, I knew that it had to be nature. And in some ways, because, you know, a lot of humankind is disconnected with that side. I think, you know, we do see, you know, we still love, like, when a flower blooms and things like that. So, you know, we are connected that way. And I just wanted to be able to capture that sort of, those things that you would see, you know.
So in a way, you're sort of almost using echidnas as an avatar for humans in this book.
Yeah, because like the first line of the book is, little one, come walk with me. And, you know, first you go, okay, people, little baby, and then I was just, what about if I just make it like a mother and daughter echidnas, and then, you know, it just that opens up that whole world, you know. You're like, oh, this is where it is, you know, it's actually down. So you see them, you know, traveling throughout.
It's funny, it seems to be a common thing. You call it the sort of, you know, your idea of the king image, and I call that the aha moment, where you have the concept that unlocks the whole book for you, but until you see that, nothing makes any sense, you know. And then, yeah.
That's right. And you know, because and then you can't ignore those, because that's, you know, and you don't second guess yourself. And I'm so excited for that book to come out, and it comes out in August, which is going to be amazing. And you know, yeah, and you know, yeah.
Can I ask, is there like, what is there any particular significance attached to echidnas for you? Do they have a sort of a?
Well, I've had, you know, I was talking about this other night about, you know, hunting in my youth and just being at bush, and just the amazing things that you would see, even just being out there, even when you're not hunting, you're just walking out there, you know, like seeing crabs in the desert after rain. And I'm talking about like right, you know, 2 hours north of Alice Springs, and crabs come out of the ground, and you know, they've been there for years. And yeah, because I've run into a couple of echidnas. Yeah, actually I ran into this huge one years ago, and I've never seen one that size. And because you go and walk into communities, and then they would tell you stories. And I remember hearing one where I was doing a mural in a place called Gingin, in an Aboriginal art centre out there, and I was painting the outside of their art centre. And his name was Uncle Ron Eppo, and he just we were talking about echidnas, and I mean, we call them Biggie Billa. And he said, he goes, "Yep, I've seen him. I've seen one." I said, "I saw an old man, echidna, a Biggie Billa. He was walking like an old man on 2 feet." He saw that, you know. He goes, "I've never seen it before," and he was like having a look. And you know, so you take all those stories on board. I mean, because you do see them like that. And I've seen them in, you know, just appear in friends' yards. And I think even Curly, she sent me when we were working on the book and I was illustrating, she said, "Look at this stuff, you know, and this echidna had turned up." And you know, and only, I think, you know, a couple of months ago, I met this old fella in Blacktown. He said, "Oh, here you go," and he had a couple of echidna quills to give me. And you know,
Sounds like that cosmic connection is still working for you.
Yeah, just, you know, that's yeah. And they're actually really interesting creatures, you know. You know, they've got a lot of folds in their brain, which means they're intelligent, and they've got like the hardest eyes of any mammal, monotreme, because when they roll up, they don't want to poke themselves in the eye. And
wow,
apparently they
bulletproof eyes.
Yeah, and apparently they have REM, and you know, just to
well, I mean, in the little preview you gave me, that was one thing that I was really captured by in your work, was how expressive your echidnas' faces were. Like they're still, you know, they're very sort of beautifully rendered, realistic echidnas, and they have this real animation and personality, and you know, the amount of expressiveness you can get into an echidna eye in your drawings is phenomenal. That they really do feel like very sentient, aware little beings in your work, as well as obviously in the real world.
Thanks,
yeah, it's very impressive. It's going to be beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we've been speaking a little bit about how you how you get in the zone when you're creating something like that, and how you kind of enter the world of the, you know, the sort of characters and environment that you're creating, and how you sort of open yourself up to that sort of getting that creative flow going. I'd just like to ask you a little bit of a curly question that I'm not a question for Curly, but a curly question, which I'm asking everybody, which if you, when you're in that zone and you're in that moment, you've got the flow going on, you're creating, everything's working the way it should, you disappear into you know, the process of creating your art. If your head was a physical space at that moment that you could go and walk around in and explore, what would it look like? What sort of space would it be?
Oh, wow. Wow. Well, it usually starts as a desert, you know, and being a desert, you know, it's like day dot. It's the beginning, and then things just grow, and all you do is just, yeah, you wander around, and because I'm an explorer at heart, and so that's what I do. I'll just wander in my head for a long time, and all you're doing really is you're just documenting what you find in there. So it's always that, and then it's all landscapes, you know, and then it's all sound. So you're just constantly exploring different terrain in there. But it will always start with the desert. It's always, you know, it's always a bare minimal in there, the minimum. And
sorry, carry on.
now, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say the trick is not to get defeated by the desert and turn back, I suppose.
Yeah, so I mean, because, you know, you're in there, the first thing you do is you look for life. And, you know, like life is water. It can be a cricket, just, you know, a grasshopper, you know, just the smallest piece of grass will mean something in there. So just those little things. Yeah, it always starts with that sort of, you know, it's like something you have to, you know, you have to master, but at the same time you have to accept. So it's always that. It's always the desert in there.
And if you find that one blade of grass at the beginning, you've got to really engage with it.
That's the hope.
It turns into an entire.
Yeah. I mean, you know, and because with the grass is seed, and so it's all, you know, it's just full. You know, I see them as, you know, see all that stuff as symbols and. Something that you know, it's got to be something you can use, like you, and that being said, whatever I find in there, you've got to be able to use it, and even if it's the bare minimum, you've got to use it to its fullest potential.
Well, I think that's a lovely note to end on, so thank you so much, Doug. You've been incredibly generous, and it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you, and really looking forward to you being able to share Dreaming with everybody in August, because I think it's going to, you know, it's going to be an absolutely wonderful book. So yeah, I'll be very much looking forward to getting my copy signed at some point. And do you have anything lined up after that? Do you know what's next? Or
I do. Bindi 2 is in the works.
Brilliant.
And I'm doing 2 books with Hachette, and Once There Was a Girl.
Oh wow! Which you're also writing?
Yes, it is written, and I'm working on that.
Was that, sorry, I know I just more or less finished the interview, but now I'm intrigued. Was that difficult to revisit once it was a boy after so many years? And did you suffer from sequelitis, or was it lovely?
Well, I think the break is good.
Yeah.
You know, it's been over 10 years.
Yeah.
And, you know, it still is difficult, you know.
Yeah. Oh, that's very exciting.
Yeah.
So lots to look forward to.
Yeah. Look, I really enjoyed talking with you, Sarah. I always do.
Yeah. Let's do it again sometime.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much. Enjoy the sunshine.
Same to you.